Welcome to Digital Literacy, a guide to using technology and journalism.
It's time for us to start talking about audio editing. So in this Digital Literacy for Journalists video, we're going to be talking about a wonderful program called Audacity. So we've got a couple of quick goals that we'll talk about here. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to set up Audacity. Audacity is a free audio editor. You can download it online. It's available for Macintoshes, it's available for Windows machines, and if you happen to use a Linux machine, it's available for that as well. There's a couple little quirks to setting it up, so we're going to go through that. Then we're going to go through getting the audio off of our audio recorders and bringing that onto our hard drives and then bringing it into an Audacity project. Then we'll go ahead and we will edit some audio, and then we will export that audio to an MP3 so that it's ready to go. So first thing you need to do is you need to go ahead and download Audacity onto your own machines. Now this is a piece of freeware, which means that you can grab it online, install it on your own personal computer, and use it as much as you want, and there's no licensing fee that goes along with it. It's developed by in what's called an open source community, which means that lots of people have contributed to it. So I have gone ahead and I have already installed the latest version of this. If you just do a quick online search for Audacity, it's going to pop up. Now there's two parts that you need for Audacity to work the way we're going to use it. The first is the program itself. That's pretty straightforward. But on the download page, you're going to see something called a LAME encoder, L-A-M-E encoder, and it's a second piece that you have to download separately. And once you've got it downloaded, you want to drop it into the same folder as Audacity. Then the first time you launch Audacity, go up under the Preferences, and you're going to come down to the libraries, and there's a place here to link it. Now I've already linked it, so it's showing that the MP3 library version, LAME 3.98.2, is already there. If you're not showing it, or as you're seeing with FFmpeg down here, library not found, go ahead and click locate and then point it at it. That LAME encoder is required for the last step that we have in Audacity, which is the export as an MP3. So you want to make sure that you go ahead and you get that taken care of before you do anything else in Audacity. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm just going to tab over to a different screen here. Now there's a couple of ways that you can bring your audio files in. If you're using one of the Zoom recorders that we talked about in the previous lesson, you can either pull the memory cards out of it if you've got an H2 or an H4, it's a standard SD card, secure digital card, or those micro SD cards that are in the H1 that are pretty small and pretty finicky. So all I'm going to do is, I've got my recorder, I'm going to plug it into a little USB cable here, and in a second on the desktop it's going to pop up as no name. And double click on that, double click on stereo, and in folder 1 here are my audio files. So for simplicity's sake, I'm going to go back one level, and I'm just going to take folder 1 and I'm going to drag that onto my desktop and let it copy over here, which should take just a second. And what I'm doing is I'm just taking all of those audio files. I know I'm not going to use all of them for this project, but I do want to grab all of them and move them over. Alright, so that has finished copying, and just because I'm a little paranoid, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to eject that and physically disconnect it from my machine so that I don't have to worry about it. Until I have those files backed up someplace else, I'm just going to make sure that I don't do anything else with that card. Now, folder 01 doesn't make a whole lot of sense, so I'm just going to click on that, and I'm going to rename that with today's date and give it a file name that makes a little more sense. One of the things that I like to do when I'm editing audio or video is keep everything sort of contained in one place. So if I come in here, I can see the 5 files that I've recorded here, and I know, because I did this recording just a little while ago, that it's the last 2 files that I'm going to want to be working on. But on the Macintosh, I can click on it once so that I highlight it, and then I can hit the space bar, and what that'll do is give me what's called quick look. So I can quickly come through here, and then I can sort of scan into this.
And real community, not just a.
And because Zoom 0004.wave doesn't mean a whole lot, I'm going to rename this. And so I'm going to call this Cayman Interview, because that's what it is, and that's what I'm going to be working on. And the last file, I just picked up a little bit of Nat sound. Just a little bit of noise of her typing on her keyboard, so I'm just going to call that one typing. And the reason I'm doing this is when I go looking for these files, if I have them named here, it makes life just a little bit easier. So we're going to tab back on over, and we're in Audacity here. So Audacity works on what's called a project basis. So it's going to collect all of these different little pieces of audio and edit description lists and code and stuff like that and keep it together in one folder, but it doesn't actually create anything until you get to the last step. So one of the first things I like to do is go ahead and save the project. So I'm going to go to Save Project As. It's going to give me a couple of little warnings here. The Audacity project file is going to have a .aup for Audacity project file. That's a file that only Audacity can open. Once again, when we get to the last step, we're going to export this into sort of a universal format of an MP3. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm just going to put this right into that same folder for now. 0809 editing exercise, so that I've got that named. And that's going to keep everything sort of clustered together. So this is Audacity, and the first time you look at it, you're going to think, it's a big blank screen. But there's a couple of cool areas in here that we need to be paying attention to. In the upper left-hand corner here, these are all play controls to move through, and we'll be using those. We've got 6 tools in here. There's 4 of them that we're going to talk about, the 4 that are on the left. We've got some meters that are here, and then down here, this is what's going to become the timeline. And if you look, you can see that it's spread out in seconds. So it's showing us from 0 seconds out to 13 seconds right now. But the first thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and bring our files in. So I'm just going to go up under File, and I'm going to come down to Import and Import Audio, and there is a shortcut here, and it's Command-Shift-I. And then I'm going to go to my desktop, and the first thing I want to bring in is that Cayman interview. And all I'm going to do is bring it in. It's going to give me a couple of options here, and one of the things it's going to do is give me this question about whether I want to make a copy of the files before editing, and I'm going to leave that checked, so that's the safest way to do this. The other option that you have is you can read the files from the original. So this isn't a very big file. It's not going to take that long to go ahead and import it. Once again, it's dragging all of that stuff into your audio files there, your audio project there. So the recorder I'm working on is a stereo recorder. So we've got a left channel, which is up here on the top, and a right channel down here on the bottom. Because we're working on sort of a small screen, one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, and under this triangle here, you can see that it's named that file, so that's Cayman interview. I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to split this stereo to mono. And what that's going to do is it's going to give me 2 different tracks. Now, because the microphones and the stereo microphones were right next to each other, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to kill off the bottom one by hitting that X. Now, this one here, I just want to make sure that it is set to mono now. And the only reason I'm doing this is because for online, and for this project, I don't necessarily need stereo separation of a left and a right channel. On some projects, you may want that. On this one, I'm not going to worry about it too much. So this is the audio, and we've got just over 3 minutes. You can see that the timeline has been adjusted here. And this is what's called a waveform, and that waveform gives me a sense of where there's audio and where there isn't. So you can see we've got a lot of audio in here. So I can come up here and I can just hit play, and this will start to play. And we can just sort of click around here and hit stop, come over here, I can hit play again, and you can hear the audio that's been recorded there. Now these up here are what are called meters. These are those same level meters that you saw when we were on the recording. Now there's a big temptation to use the pause button here because everybody likes to use the pause button. I recommend getting into the habit of not using the pause button, and the reason for that is when you have the pause button on, it locks out a lot of other functions. It's a little quirk to Audacity. I'm not really sure why it does it, but I just tend to use the stop button. So we talked about these 4 tools here. The first one that's selected now is what's called an iBar, or a selection tool, and this will allow me to come in here and just select different segments of my audio. The other ones that we're going to use are the zoom tool here, which will allow me to come in and zoom in, and you can see that my timeline here has expanded and I'm getting a closer view of this. When I'm in the zoom tool, if I hold down the shift key, you can look very carefully, you'll see that there's a plus in the middle of that magnifying glass. The shift key will make it a minus and let me zoom back out so I can see all of my audio. That's really handy when you need to get in and make very, very precise selections. The other 2 tools in the middle column here, we'll demonstrate those in a little bit. If you've ever worked in a word processing program, you're going to be able to translate a lot of those skills right over here into editing audio, because all we're going to be doing is cutting and pasting audio, which sounds a little silly, but that's really all we're going to be doing is going ahead and adjusting audio. So the first thing I want to do is I want to find the first segment of audio that I want to use. So I'm going to go back to my iBar tool here, and I know since I recorded this that this is just sort of me talking. All right, so what I want to do first is I want to find where my subject introduces her, which I think is going to be right around here. So I've got my iBar here, and I'm just going to hit play, and we'll listen here for a few seconds. And what is it that you do for a living?
My name is Mira Kamen, and I'm a freelance writer and blogger.
Okay, so that's her introduction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, and I'm just going to select this segment here. Now, if I go a little bit too far, when I get to the end of this, you'll see there's a little hand that pops up. I can just grab that and I can drag it in. All right, now remember I said that working in a word processor, this is the same idea. We've got all of this basically transcription, and what we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste it into a different track, into a different part of the document. So I can go up here under Edit and go to Copy, and then I'm going to go to Tracks, Add New Audio Track, and you're going to see it gives me a blank track down here. I can then go back to Edit and Paste. You can see that it gave me that audio down there. It just pasted it straight down. Now, if I come in here and want to move this to the beginning, that's when I'm going to use one of these other tools, the horizontal arrow tool here. I'm just going to click on that, and this is going to let me drag this over here to the beginning. Now, if I come back to the beginning, and just so you know, this purple double arrow key over here on the left, this brings you all the way back to the start. If I press play now, I'm going to hear everything, and I don't want to do that. So I can just temporarily mute that first column. You'll see it grays out, and now I can play this.
My name is Mira Kamen, and I'm a freelance writer and blogger.
All right, so there's my first edit. So I'm going to unmute this, and I'm going to come back to my iBar, and I'm going to find where my next question is, which I think is right about here. So let me listen to the question. And remember when we talked about audio recording, we talked about making sure there's enough separation between your question and then their answer. This is why you want to be able to do this.
Freelance blogging realm, and what does it mean to you on a regular basis?
I started writing online about 8 years ago. I started a personal blog as a hobby and kind of a release and cheap therapy, not thinking that it was going to lead to anything really other than maybe connecting with some like-minded folks.
All right, so I want that segment there from about there right in through here. But if I listen to the beginning of this, you're going to hear there's like an inhalation from her.
I started writing online about...
And I want to get rid of that. So now I'm going to use that zoom tool, and I'm going to zoom in on this segment just so that it's a little bit easier. And you see that waveform there? That's going to give me some idea as to where that is. And if I just come back to the beginning here, I can grab this, slide it over, and once again I can press play.
I started writing online about 8 years ago.
Listen again, and you'll hear that we've taken out that little bit of crinkling noise.
I started writing online about 8 years ago. I started a personal blog as a hobby and kind of a release and cheap therapy, not thinking that it was going to lead to anything really other than maybe connecting with some like-minded folks. And within about the first 6 months, I had built up this audience, and blogging sort of in general was gaining momentum, and it started to become clear that...
Oops, I ended that a little too soon. So what I can do again is I can come down here to the end, and I can just drag this out. And let's see if that's going to give me what I want.
I started writing online about 8 years ago. I started a personal blog as a hobby and kind of a release and cheap therapy, not thinking that it was going to lead to anything really other than maybe connecting with some like-minded folks. And within about the first 6 months, I had built up this audience, and blogging sort of in general was gaining momentum, and it started to become clear that, you know, maybe it could be something more than that. Maybe it could lead to other writing jobs. And
right. Now, again, I need to listen to this a little more closely and play around with this. But for this, let's just go ahead, and I'm going to go up under Edit. And since I have that selected, I have it highlighted, I'm just going to copy it. And on a Mac, you can just hit Command-C, same thing on a Windows machine, to copy that. I'm going to zoom back out. So again, I'm going to hold down the Shift key here so that I can see my entire timeline. I'm going to go to Tracks. I'm going to add a new audio track once again. And now I'm just going to hit Command-V and paste that in there. And again, it's going to line it up here, but I don't necessarily want it there. So I'm going to click this, and I'm going to slide this back over, and it's going to snap into place. See that little yellow line that just popped up there? So now I can mute this, go back to my beginning, listen to this.
My name is Mira Kamen, and I'm a freelance writer and blogger. I started writing online about 8 years ago. I started a personal blog.
So one of the things you want to watch out for when you're editing audio is listening for your subject's cadence. They're going to speak at a fairly predictable rate. And if you get the cadence wrong at your edit points, meaning that your edit is too tight, it's going to sound a little rushed. And if it's too long, it's going to sound like there's a mistake that's in there. So you want to be careful about that. Now, why did I add an extra track in here? It's a lot of folks just like to sort of dump everything onto one track. The reason I like to do this is I can actually come in here and I can rename these tracks. So right now it's just audio track 1. I can call this one intro. And then I could call this blogging history. And this will help me remember what these different segments are. And that's just going to make it a little bit easier to organize these different things. So I have that other audio track. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to import that other audio track, which was the typing. All right. And once again, I'm going to let it make a copy there. And so now I've got this. And once again, I'm going to split the stereo track to mono. I'm going to kill off one of these. I'm going to make sure that this is still set to mono here. And if I want to, I can move this up, because right now, if I'm looking at this sort of hierarchically, I've got my original source, my 2 edited pieces, and then another piece of source. One of the things I like to do is keep all of my sources up at the top. So one of the things I can do is I can come in here and I can move this track up. And it's a bit of a pain. I kind of wish that there was a way to move it all the way up at once, but there isn't. So I'm going to mute my 2 edited pieces here so that I can just listen to my typing. All right, so let's go ahead and I'm going to grab some of this, because I think I want a little bit of typing in there. So I'm going to hit Copy, Tracks, Add New. Gives it to me down here on the bottom. I'm going to paste it, and I want that to start right at the beginning. And I'm going to mute this, and I'm going to unmute this, and unmute this. So all I'm going to be hearing is the typing and then her talking. But if I come back to the beginning and play this, you're going to hear that the typing's kind of loud, and it's going to be going over her voice.
My name is Mira Kamen, and I'm a freelance writer and blogger.
So that's a little annoying. In the middle of this palette over here, I've got this plus minus slider, and what this is going to do is this is going to allow me to adjust the volume, and audio volume is called gain. So I'm going to knock that down to -10 decibels, go back to the beginning, and let's see how this sounds.
My name is Mira Kamen, and I'm a freelance writer and blogger.
And this is how I would layer in some natural sound onto an audio piece. What this is allowing me to do is go ahead and have that audio there, but I can adjust the relative volume of it to my main source. Now, this is going to end fairly abruptly. If I come back in here and bring my player here and we play it, you're going to hear that it just...
8 years ago, I started a personal blog as a hobby and kind of a release and cheap therapy.
It just stops. So there's another way that I can control those audio levels, and it's by controlling the waveform. So this 4th tool up here, which is sort of the vertical arrows, the envelope tool as it's called, if I come in here and I click in a couple of places, it's going to give me points. And so what I can do is I can affect the way that audio falls off. So by squeezing this here, what it's going to do is it's going to drop that audio level down to almost nothing by the time it gets to the end. So let's do that. And I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to play this and listen to the typing in the background.
My name is Mira Kamen, and I'm a freelance writer and blogger. I started writing online about 8 years ago. I started a personal blog as a hobby and kind of a release. And
so what that's allowing me to do is to just go ahead and fade out that audio. And you can fade things in, you can fade it out. This is also handy if your microphone got too close or too far from your subject in the middle of an audio piece, in the middle of an interview, and you've got inconsistent levels there. So you can go in and you can boost the levels, or you can cut them using the control over there in the palette, which controls the entire thing, or just that envelope tool, and squeeze that. So, all right, so let's say that we were done editing with this audio at this point in time. What I want to do is I want to make sure that I go in and I save the project. I can just hit Command S or come up here and save the project. Now I want to export it, because right now it's just this project file, and there's nothing that I can really do with it at this point in time. So this is where it gets a little quirky. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kill off my 2 original audio sources. Now, I want to make sure I save my project before I do this, and then I'm not going to save it again after I do this. It's a little weird. So I'm going to kill this off, and I'm going to kill off the typing. So all I have are these pieces here. And the reason for this is, even if I have them muted and I export this, as I'll show you in a moment, it's going to give me an exported file that's the length of the longest piece of audio, which is 3.5 minutes or 3.25 minutes, when all I really want is about 35 or 40 seconds worth of it here. So I've killed that off. I'm going to go to File and Export, and I'm going to go to Format, and I'm going to change this to MP3, which is right there. And I'm just going to send it to my desktop again. All right, and I'm going to click Save. It's going to pop up and ask me all of these little ID tags here. You can just leave these blank. If you want to go ahead and fill the stuff in, it's not a bad habit if you're going to be posting things online. This would show up in iTunes and other music players and things like that. And then click OK. It's going to tell me that it's going to be mixed into a single mono channel. That's OK. And then it's going to go ahead and it's going to dump it out. So I'm just going to come over here to an open screen, and there's my MP3 sitting on my desktop. And if I wanted to just hit spacebar.
My name is Mira Kamen, and I'm a freelance writer and blogger. I started writing online about 8 years ago. I started a personal blog as a hobby and kind of a
And that's it. So that's the basics of Audacity there. Now, you're probably going to ask, why did we send it out as an MP3 file? An MP3 file is probably the most universally playable file. And when we get to audio slideshows in a later lesson, the MP3 file is the only audio format that you can bring into the audio slideshow program, SoundSlides, that we use here. So let's go through your vocabulary really quickly. Some of these we talked about, and some of these I'm just going to fill in. In audio, there are three primary types of audio formats. The one that we're going to be working with the most in the recorder is a WAV file, a WAV file. And when we're done, we're going to export as an MP3 file. Now, there's another one that we mentioned briefly in the previous lesson called a WMA, or a Windows Media Audio file. And some of you may have recorders that use WMA file formats. If you do, you have to go through a conversion process before you bring them into Audacity. There's a program out there called Switch, S-W-I-T-C-H, and you can poke around and you can download that online, and that will convert from a WMA to a WAV file pretty quickly and pretty seamlessly. And you'll need to do that before you come into Audacity. So you want to make sure that you have that if you have an audio recorder that only does WMA files. We talked about audio tracks here, and the audio tracks are the ways of looking at individual segments here laid out horizontally on the Audacity project window there. We talked about the difference between stereo, which is left and right being a little bit different, and mono. For most of your projects here at Grady, you're probably going to want to go ahead and do them as mono. We talked about the concept of a project where everything is going to be pulled together into one folder, and then once we're done working with the project, we export it into a final type of an audio project. So as a task, here's what I would recommend doing. Go ahead and record an audio interview and pick up some natural sound. You know, if you're interviewing a writer, the keyboard makes kind of good sense there. And then go ahead and edit it into a short piece, and then share it with other folks and make sure that they can listen to it and make sure that it makes sense.
This series was produced for the Journalism Department of the Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Georgia by a grant from the James M. Cox Institute for Newspaper Management Studies.